Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am your host, Bobby Brill, and today we're going to talk about working with security and working with the federal government with our guest, Dave Barber from Salient Systems. Dave, so wonderful to have you here.
Super, Bobby. Thanks for the invite, and great to spend time with you.
Walk us through your role at Salient and your expertise in working with the government, working with security systems over your long career.
My role at Salient, I handle our government marketplace and government sales nationally within the U.S. I also have a territory with about 6 states that I manage commercial and day-to-day business. My job is twofold. Number one, identify opportunities in the federal space as well as commercial space, and work with our partners in developing that partner relationship that will allow us to fulfill the needs within the federal space of the U.S. government.
So, Dave, can you walk us through the trends that are happening in security, more as they pertain to this monolith of government security?
Interesting enough, when you ask that, a lot of people don't realize that really what the government does today sometimes trickles down into the private sector months or even years to come. It's almost like in the car manufacturing business. A lot of, in security, when we get into AI, some of those things developed in the automobile industry and they've trickled down into security now. So we see some of those trends happening where government is trying to and really looking to bolster security from their network, people penetrating the network, do authentication, making sure whoever is accessing secure information is actually who they say they are, whether they're using biometrics or they're using, again, single or dual sign-in authentication. There's a lot of mechanisms that's going into place that are starting to work their way now into the private sector and industry. So those are some things that are happening today that we see government security influencing private sector.
Interesting. So it's not exactly a top-down way of thinking. We all think, the Star Wars program back in the 80s and science fiction and coming down to the consumer level, but there's more of an ebb and flow, would you say? Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say there's probably some things that trickle from the other side, but for the most part, the government's really looking to secure the information they have, that they keep it out of the wrong hands. They keep it in the right hands. And so therefore they tend to be trendsetters in that area and push the requirements down to the private sector to also secure that information.
Interesting, because that's what we really want to break down today. The idea of video in security. Would you say that it's a large part of modern day security or a small part? How does that work, and how does video really fit in today's cybersecurity world?
Well, you always hear the term, and when people ask what I do and I start to describe it, they go, "Oh, you're Big Brother," and that's an ambiguous term, But the reality is there are a lot of security cameras out there, and I don't know the true counts of how many cameras are in the federal space versus normal day-to-day private sector. But I would say that a lot of the federal organizations are still siloed. There's a big part of the video in the biggest part of the federal customer base, because there's hundreds of federal agencies out there that still using video somewhat as a forensic base. Something happened, they're going back to look at it and they're analyzing at that point. Now, some of the trends we do see happening is where some of our federal customers are coming to me saying, "Okay, Dave, we're updating our video. We want to tie some things together. We want access to work within that. We also want to know when things are happening that should not be happening." So you may look at it and say, "How do you do that?" If I'm an agency and I've got 1,000 cameras, how can you employ enough people to sit there and look at the screens? Because we've seen all the analysis of what you can see and watch, and it's just not possible. So there are analytics out there now today that will look and examine your video and say, "You know what? You've run a predictor on here, and we've looked at your video, and what's happening today in your video in this particular camera has not happened historically. So you need to take a look at it and either deal with what's happened, or B, actually label that as a nuisance alarm. So there's analytics out there, and some of them call themselves analytics, some do not. They call themselves an anomaly detection. But those type of things are really beginning to get some traction into the federal space as well as the private sector, where computer learning really has the ability to work for us in a very inexpensive way. And it gets us in a position where we can now look at video and what's happening that really has not happened. And I need to draw my attention to that. And again, tag what's happening so I get further reports on that. Or that's just a nuisance and I don't want to see that kind of alert coming into my system again.
Right, because that's got to be something that I think all of us who have either a Ring camera or any kind of home security device, you're getting monitoring. Four have popped up on my phone already since we've talked of, the bird flying by. It's like, well, that's not something. Motion in my front yard. Well, is it motion? Is it a person? Is it a human being? And without fail, the UPS driver, I always get the notice 3 seconds after he's left. So for now, when we're working with AI and this human monitoring on the government security level, this high level security, you also had touched upon this idea of forensic based security and how these two marry together. Talk a little bit about that, because I don't think a lot of people really understand. They understand the word and they understand video, and we've all seen CSI reruns, but what does this actually mean in the world of government security?
Well, when you look at CSI, some of that is Hollywood, as we well know. But the reality is there are analytics out there, and we have partnerships with many of them. I don't want to get into naming names. And we also have customers that use some of their technologies on a day-to-day basis. So you have the ability to go back and look at and analyze video and say, hey, I want to see when X, Y, or Z happened, and go back and sample a day, 2, 3, 5 of video and show me the overlays of when this happened. So that can be a very powerful. The other thing is, um, somebody lost something. I come in from, previous day work, I'm going home and I notice somebody is backed into my vehicle. Those are forensic based things where you go back and you look and you then say, okay, did anybody walk by the vehicle? I think of a scenario. I was on a campus environment back about 2 months ago, and there happened to be some trash that was thrown into a particular person's vehicle because they left their window down that day. The weather was beautiful. And so, just going back, it took a matter of a few minutes to see who actually did that, rewinding, looking at that, and finding that. So there's different ways of gathering that information and looking, whether it's a minor infraction or whether it's something major, recreating what happened. Now you get to the next step, which is, really trying to step in when it's happened, getting to the point where you can almost see it happening and you can stop something bad from happening. And that's where, AI along with human monitoring comes in. And analytics are really progressing and getting much better at being able to tell us things in near real time of what's happening. And I can tell you at Salient, we are working really strong in the R&D side to make sure we bring those best of breed technologies into our application, that the end user, government or private sector, can say, this is what we're looking for. And we can take to them 2, 3, 4 different partners that actually do that and allow them to lay those beside each other, test them in their environment, and really make a decision and a procurement decision on what's going to best fit their needs. And that's, we're part of an open platform community, and that's what really makes and separates us from a lot of our competitors out there, because we don't steer you in a path of what we have bought, maybe own, and developed into our platform. We are a VMS provider. And so what we have done is we take those high-end analytics that are out there creating an industry for themselves. We integrate those into our platform. So it is, in a way, our development and our product. But again, we're bringing multiple types of analytics together that an end user can make a decision on what fits their needs based upon what they're looking to gather information on.
Interesting. So this has a very scalable way of looking at it with budget and time and manpower, of course, because you've got thousands of cameras, which doesn't really seem like a lot anymore. You've got monitoring, you've got AI monitoring, you've got human monitoring, all of these things coming together to battle this cybersecurity threat. Talk a little bit more about how this cybersecurity and these cyber attacks have changed, because we're often thinking of this high-tech system where we're using a lot of computing power, a lot of cameras, and then low-tech where the cameras and the systems also do play into it. What are these differences in the high-tech and low-tech cyber attacks and how they're monitored?
Well, in today's market, I think back to even something that happened yesterday. I got an email from one of our partners, a national partner, and it was telling me to click on a link to look at a procurement and a bid. And although I know the gentleman that the email came from, it just seemed a little odd in the manner in which it came. So what we find is that a lot of the people, or a lot of the software platforms that are out there from a cyber standpoint, that are trying to capture information to harm us, these are machine driven. And so they're going out there and they're sending emails and they're sending things that really are getting better at looking authentic. And so as a user, we've got to be more in mind of saying, okay, is this really a real email? To reaching out to these people. I reached out to the gentleman and said, hey, did you happen to send me an email? He goes, no. And he commented that he had earlier seen an email from one of his partners, that he clicked on a link logging into his OneDrive. And I said, yeah, the number one thing was that should have sort of flagged something for you is when you're clicking on a link of somebody you work with, and they're asking you to input your credentials for your OneDrive that you probably already logged into. I said, so my recommendation to him was to go back and change his authentication to that remote drive. But with that said, even when you get into video, there are many ways that people, uh, machines are trying to gain access to our private information. And they're using these where people make small mistakes to gain access to secure data. And so, part of what we deal on our video side is really protecting that. So not only you're trying to keep people out of buildings, but we're continuing on the cyber side of our application within R&D to develop additional protections so people cannot access video and have remote access where they shouldn't, and get maybe data that's tied into an access control system. And so, those things, I know when we work with some facilities that are NERC facilities in the electrical area, we have some things that are in place there to really protect the end user's data while they can still access the video that may be integrated to our platform. And that really gives us some legs up against some of our competitors.
Mm. Talk to me about some of those, if you can, because I know, we're protecting against this problem is saying, here's a problem, figure out a better way to do it. What are some of these issues that come up that people may not be thinking about, that are issues that video and salient systems are policing or have policed and helped protect in the past?
Well, certainly there's been different, let me think of how to say this. There's been different tools that are used in the developmental path that have been found historically to have some security flaws. And certainly, not only us, but other manufacturers have had to change and adapt to what they use. I mean, let's talk about Java, for example. Java was once a widely used um, tool for video in different browsers and things of that nature. Well, as different hackers were able to get more sophisticated, they were able to really show some vulnerabilities with what Java did. And you fast forward to 2022, December, now we see that Java is end of life. It's not out there. You're not developing to it. Everybody that did use it has really stripped it out of their product. And those are some of the things that manufacturers like us have to continue to adapt and develop to. And that's really, that gives credence to why those that use, whether it's our platform or other platforms, you really need to make sure they are maintaining their platform. Just like your operating system on your computer, you get patches and fixes and things that are being pushed down to you on a regular basis. You want to make sure you're maintaining that same level of scrutiny to your security and your video platforms. And that's, as a manufacturer, we really talk to our end users and making sure not only new features, but that security enhancements are being added in the system and making those known. So that's just one thing, and there's probably dozens of them if I really think back that we've changed, and I know others have changed to really create a much more secure environment for logging in and accessing your security information.
When working now in the government sector, I'm sure it has to be very different than the private sector. I mean, there's a lot of stopgaps, a lot of paperwork, I can only imagine, but there seems to be a different way of working with a government entity when it comes from purchasing and procurement. What should a client be aware of when heading down that path?
Well, if I'm a security integrator, and I'm looking to break into the market for the federal side of things, there's a lot of things you need to really consider. First of all, it can be difficult to sell into the federal market unless you have some certain uh, credentials or, let's say, qualifications. For example, in some of the projects we worked with recently on the Veterans Hospital, the VA tends to, and we can appreciate this, they love when they have the opportunity to work with a veteran owned business that would supply them with security applications and solutions. And so, as a manufacturer, we certainly want to have a couple of those contracts, or excuse me, contract holders and qualified integrators that will be part of our marketplace and be part of our program. And so there are, as I was supplying some information to our inside office recently, there was about 7 different types of contracts and qualifications that are out there just from a federal perspective to do business. So, for example, I may be a minority owned business, I may be a woman owned business, veteran owned business. We've already talked about that. And there's other contracts, whether it's just GSA, whether it's a SOUP contract, there's many other contracts that are out there. So you may be working with a federal agency and they draw a scope up and they work with the partner. This is what we want. The requirements for federal is that they do get the best price because in reality they buy more than really any particular private sector business would. So they demand best price. And so it really comes down to us working with the integrator, but also working with the procurement, because once that leaves the hands of the security professional, it goes into the hands of the procurement team. And the procurement team is going to use a contract vehicle to basically solicit that and solicit quotes. And if you are not or do not have a partner that you're comfortable with that is able to fulfill on that contract vehicle, you may go down a path of not being able to get what you want, and you may have to put it out again. So sometimes it's the security team within that federal agency working in conjunction with their procurement team to make sure the proper vehicle is used, as well as those that know the products they're looking and they found that fulfill their need actually can be procured through the contract vehicles that the contracting agency is looking to solicit it on. I know that's a lot of words, but I have seen sometimes where we've had salespeople that go out, they contact me about a project, and then they call me up and they're a little frantic. Do you have anybody that works on this contract? Because the procurement team put it out in this contract. And so we have to sometimes shift the way we go about what we're.
Interesting, because I think anybody that's done fulfillment or filled an order or actually gotten that invoice has gone, well, you've already sold it. It's too late now. Now we have to fix it. Now we actually have to chase it down. These are big issues when dealing with a large monolith of a client, correct? What are some ways that, or some advice that you can give clients about that?
Well, there's a lot of unique things we do. And again, I'll say the statement again is we're an open platform solution. We are a pure VMS. So we develop and put our R&D time into making our VMS be a top-notch VMS out there. With
Well,
that
explain
said,
VMS for us, just in case.
a video management system. So we manage video. We work with NDAA compliant products, particularly in the federal space. You have to be an NDAA compliant solution. And we also have integrations and with different access control companies that we market and work with, some stronger than others, where we can provide TAA equipment or work with them to provide TAA when you're getting into, let's say, maybe it's a military facility. And we're working with other agencies as well on contract vehicles to be part of that solution where they're trying to streamline bringing stuff onto a military base. So I know you've asked what makes Salient different, unique. One of those is being, again, a leader in as far as being, we're an NDA compliant. We're a Texas-based U.S. company, so we are owned and operated out of U.S. We're just not a North American company. We are a U.S.-based company, and so a lot of times your federal customers are looking, first of all, to buy from an American-owned business if at all possible, and then they'll look at North America. Secondly, we have some unique capabilities that really allows us to scale video, which in my 20 plus years of being in the video space, I've not seen anybody else scale video the way we do at the recorder, which really plays well with our federal end users that in some cases may not have. They may be pulling stuff in through secure cellular, secure wireless. And so bandwidth may be something they're really looking at. And the way we manage our bandwidth through our dynamic resolution scaling really plays well with it. The other thing is, I would say, by us being an open platform, again, when we bring these different technologies, we don't license those integrations. Those integrations are brought to you from our side, and they integrate at no cost from us. Now, that doesn't mean that particular manufacturer may not charge a connection fee, but Salient does not charge a connection fee. So we can really be something that can be competitive in nature, but also resilient on the network. The other thing is we really have a strong dealer network across the U.S. And we work with some of the largest integrators that do play in the security market. I'm based in Virginia, and if we look at the market here being D.C., Virginia, and Maryland, I'm right in the midst of it. Fortunately, I'm a little bit out of the D.C. Metro area, so I can sort of shelter myself from that. But the reality is I'm within about an hour drive of most any federal dealer, and everything federal starts in the DC area and then branches out into other cities and states within the U.S. So we're very, very well poised to manage that. And some of the relationships we have through Dell and others has really, I think, put us in a strong position of working with those customers. Because let's face the fact, some of the names I've mentioned there are certainly well known within the federal community.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, Dave, we could talk about this for much longer and go in more detail, but I'm going to wrap it up here. That's been Dave Barber with Salient Systems. And for more information, please check out www.salientsys.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And again, thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Bobby. Have a great day.